Welcome back for another edition of Forage Focus. On today's show, we're going to be talking about preparing for the shearer to come to your farm.
On today's show, I have two special guests with me, Gregg Fogle and Brady Campbell, both from the Ohio State University, and we're currently filming at the Ohio Sheep Shearing School. We'd love to see you out here sometime, and we'll share the details of how to get involved at the end of this episode.
I'm Gregg Fogle. I'm the manager with the OARDC Sheep Unit in Wooster, Ohio, and we're here today helping with the shearing school. We have about 15 participants, and I want to thank the Brady Campbell farm and family for hosting this event today.
Yeah, my name is Brady Campbell. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Animal Sciences here at the university, and my role is primarily going to be the state small ruminant specialist. And yeah, we're excited to be here today. We've got a lot of students out here and excited to get to work with them.
I'm here with Dr. Brady Campbell, our new small ruminant specialist within OSU Extension. Brady, this is one of your first activities since being appointed as a small ruminant specialist, and we're so thrilled to have you again on Forage Focus.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christine. Excited to be here. We've got a lot of participants today. We've gone through a lot of sheep, as you can see here in the background, and excited for our day tomorrow as well.
Yeah, so can you tell me a little bit about what the sheep team does in regard to hosting this shearing event and what we think is going to happen with it in the future?
Sure. So this is put in part together with the Ohio Sheep Improvement Association and also sponsored by our state's checkoff program, which is through the Ohio Sheep and Wool program. And with us being an extension, the OSU Sheep Team, which here in the near future, Christine, will be changing to the Ohio State University Small Ruminant Team. But our primary goal here is just to offer support both from the university and extension standpoint. So as we move forward, we hope to offer more chances and opportunities for our students and our participants to be out here in the field learning real life skills. Unfortunately, in our industry, Christine, there becomes fewer and fewer or less and less sheep shearers or individuals that know how to shear, whether that be a sheep, a camelid, or even an Angora goat. And unfortunately, it's a skill that's dying, but we're here today to keep that tradition alive.
And it's a really excellent opportunity that typically comes around twice a year. We usually offer a spring and a fall shearing school. And so if this sounds like an opportunity that's interesting to you, make sure you're checking out our OSU Extension pages for updates, and also consider becoming a member of your state commodity organization so you can get updates about similar events. Now, this show is Forage Focus, so let's dive into why preparing for your shearer to come is part of your forage management if you do have animals with marketable fleeces. There's obviously a lot of planning that goes into the day before the shearer shows up on the farm. When we're talking about taking animals off pasture ahead of time before the shearer gets there, Brady, do you have any tips for managers on timelines of what tasks need to be accomplished and anything that's helpful for either animal or the shearer's well-being?
Yeah, certainly, Christine. Of course, if your animals are out on pasture, we want to make sure that we bring them in. We want to make sure that those fleeces are clean. Unfortunately, we've got some scenarios where we may have gotten behind on brush management or pasture management. We know the dreaded cocklebur that's out in our pastures, and it's just like Velcro. It'll connect to that fleece, and unfortunately, there's not much that we can do in that respect. It's just a bit more challenging. We do lose the value of that entire fleece that's been infected with it. So one thing that I would encourage producers prior to the day of shearing is thinking about a holistic management program and ensuring that we've got brush and briars cleaned up out in our pasture fields. But as we think about getting our shearer hired and getting them there at the appropriate time period, first and foremost, make sure that you have one available and you've got the contact for them. Our shearers, because we have so few here in the state of Ohio and across the Midwest, we need to book them. We need to book them early to make sure that they can get to us at an appropriate time. Make sure that we're not shearing during the hot summer months. Many of our shearers won't do it just due to the extreme heat. So it's primarily spring, fall, sometimes in winter as well. Thinking about preparing for that shearer to arrive to your farm, make sure that they're inside and they're dry and they're clean. There's nothing worse than a wet sheep, Christine. Certainly don't want to deal with that.
No, I mean, it's not fun to deal with as far as coming in contact with your skin and your clothes, but it's really going to be hard for your equipment.
Yeah, exactly. That water's going to really wick away on that oil and just makes a challenging time for it to happen. When we bring them inside, we want to ensure that we're not putting down a fresh coating of straw or any type of bedding in our barn. I know it's kind of cliche, we want that to look really nice and presentable to our visitors to our farm, but that's the more vegetable matter or any of our bedding that will get into those fleeces. But we certainly don't want it to be a dirty mess either, contaminated with a lot of manure. So something in between. So if you know that the shear is coming, perhaps bed that barn down about a week or two beforehand. And then also we want to hold those animals off of feed for about 12 to 24 hours, depending upon when that shear is coming. I myself don't like to hold them off of water. I think that they do need that resource to them. But the reason that we're pulling them off feed is twofold. One is going to ensure that we don't get none of that fresh chaff from that hay that we've harvested and worked so hard for. And you know how sheep are. They want to burrow their head into that hay bale there. They'll get chaff all over that head, that poll, and along the neck. And that's going to be a challenge when we're looking at wool quality. And then secondly, we want to ensure that we keep a clean working area. If these animals allow them to clean out for 12 to 24 hours, we'll have a cleaner environment for us to be working in.
And Brady, when you say keep them off feed for 12 to 24 hours, that's not just feed as in grain in the bunk. We're talking about pulling them off pasture as well as restricting feed in the barn. We want them to have an empty stomach for the most part, except from staying hydrated. Before we put them through the stress of shifting their bodies around in awkward positions, that's just going to reduce the stress on the animal. And if the animal is more comfortable, it's going to be a more pleasant experience for the shearer as well.
You bet. One thing I will note, Christine, is we know how fresh and lush our pastures are during the springtime, and we do want to take advantage of that, don't get me wrong. But another tip or trick that we could do is bring those animals into the barn for a couple days, put them on a hay diet. We've got a bit more fiber in that diet, and we can keep them from getting so loose. We all know how they look like. We know that they're doing a good job when those rear ends are messy because they've been out in some really nice lush forage. But when we want to try to keep this product clean, we want to keep this working area clean. Try to avoid that really high moisture type of forage.
Right. And aside from, making sure that your animals are in good condition, that's going to help you build a good relationship with your shearer, and they will remember if you were well prepared for them to come. If you're not well prepared for them to come, there's high demand for shearers, and so they may take somebody else's opportunity over yours next time if it's not a well-prepared, welcoming environment for them when they do show up. Brady, something that managers may be tempted to do is bring animals in before the shearer comes and get a lot of tasks checked off that to-do list while they have them in. There's some problems that come with doing vaccinations or drenching for parasites or even hoof trimming before your shearer comes. It's really not ideal to do those things. Why not?
Right, there's a lot of reasons why, Christine. For example, we'll talk about parasites, and we've talked a lot about this on the show together, and it used to be common practice that we would be deworming or treating animals for parasites on a calendar basis. Well, through our research and our work through Extension and the university, we found out that is no longer the recommended practices. We should be treating on an as-needed basis. So first and foremost, don't go through and treat every animal unless they are absolutely in need. Secondly, when we're talking about parasites, think about the process that goes on through shearing, and I'm sure you're going to give an example of that. We twist that animal around and we kind of contort that body. Think about giving that drench to them and how that could upset their system as that anthelmintic or that drug product is rolling around within the system. When we think about vaccines, it makes a lot of sense because we may have them in a crush or a raceway or some type of handling system. But what we want to do when we're working with a vaccine is ensure that we have the least amount of stress possible. We try to make shearing as stressless or less stressful as possible, but the reality of it is that there's going to be some reaction from the animal just due to handling, and that's nothing that we can control. We can do it appropriately to have a low stress environment, but it's not to say that it's stress-free. And so when we think about a vaccine, we want to ensure that it's working to its greatest ability. And so we know that stress will negatively affect the immune system. So if we're shearing, we're trying to expect this animal to have some type of response to the vaccine that we're administering. We may have a lower efficacy of that vaccine. And then you also talked about hoof trimming. I know that's a management practice that needs to be done, but it's certainly not the place when we're talking about shearing. Think about those hoof clippings getting into the fleece itself. That'll be matter that isn't needed to be there, but also we just don't have the time. The shearer's time is valuable, your time is valuable, and most times they're there for one task and one task only, and that's to take that fleece off as efficiently and humanely as possible. So we don't want to be interrupting that flow that they've got going on either.
Definitely. Another thing to watch out for too, or inform your shearer of ahead of time, is the way that you do your ear tag. A lot of people still use metal scrapey ID tags, and that's really unpleasant to run your handpiece right into a metal tag. So if that is something that you're using, let your shearer know so that you don't have an accident, unexpectedly run into one of those. We have heard that happen, and it can ruin equipment, and it could also cause injury either to a person or your animals. So, just being open and upfront with your shearer when they arrive and even beforehand so they know what to expect when they get to your farm is really going to be helpful in maintaining that relationship and also give you the most healthy and desired outcome for your animals at the end of the day. Brady, many of our shearers are traveling from one farm to the next, and where people travel, so do biosecurity concerns for animals. And so there's some things you can do as a manager both for your own flock and also things that shearers do to help minimize the possibility of moving diseases from one farm to another. What are some of the bigger diseases that tend to be on the radar that may be a concern during shearing?
Yeah, when we think about our shearing equipment, especially our hand pieces or our mats or anything that we're shearing the animals on, we need to be thinking about CL or caseous lymphangitis, which is also known as a cheesy gland, and then also sore mouth. You can think that we could pick that up anywhere. It could be in the feedlot barn. It can be at someone's purebred flock if they've got a small flock. It could be at a wool producer's farm, or it could be at the local county fair. Stuff that can it's very zoonotic, so you can also get it yourself as well. So maybe interact with your producer if you're a shearer going out and about and seeing. And then on the opposite side, if you are the owner of these animals and you have some of these known problems, feel free to share that with them. Be very open and transparent about it. The CL, the sore mouth, and also if you've got your own equipment that you're touching or handling and the sheep are walking across it, foot rot is also a concern that we can see as well. So our recommendations there is as long as you're open and upfront with your shearer, they're aware of it, and then the shearer is going to take care of that equipment themselves. They'll go through, they'll make sure that it's clean. They're going to sterilize it somehow, whether that be with some rubbing alcohol or something of that nature. We can dip our combs and cutters into a vat of that solution. We certainly don't want to dunk them and leave them in there, especially with all the electrical equipment that we've got. I encourage you to spray down your mats and then also go ahead and hang it out on the fence line there at home and just kind of let the sun cook it away as well.
My other guest today is Gregg Fogle, and Gregg is the flock manager at our Wooster Small Ruminant Research Center. Gregg, you were previously at Columbus, correct?
21 years. I was in Columbus and then just moved to Wooster, Ohio in December of 2019.
How many sheep do you have under your management right now?
We have about 200 ewes that we lamb in the spring and 50 ewes to lamb in the fall, and then 45 goats.
Wow. So when it comes to thinking about shearing, what goes through your mind management-wise on deciding when to shear, as far as if you're going to choose spring, fall, once a year, twice a year, and then do you do any special shearing events to help when it comes to time to lamb?
Right. Some of that depends on facilities. We would obviously shear feeder lambs. You'd like to shear them, after weaning to 100 pounds, and then it's nice to have a 60 to 90-day growth on them before we sell those at market. When we sell lambs to the meat lab, we do shear those right before they get delivered. They like them for a teaching process because they're cleaner. The carcasses stay cleaner when they're fabricated during the processing part. If you're going to keep sheep outside, you can do crutching. We crutch our ewes before they lamb in the fall, so we just did that last week. So that way they're cleaner, and we do shear one pass in front of the udder. But all our ewes that lamb in the spring would be sheared about 1st of March, and then they would lamb at the end of March, so 30 days pre-lambing. And then our fall lambing ewes we would shear in the spring also. That way they have a 6-month fleece on at lambing, and then they have fleece on because they do stay outside during the winter.
Last I knew, typical market for the highest valued pelts was a 1-inch fleece.
Right.
And I think that's still current.
Correct.
And so if you are trying to be in the pelt market, which hasn't been very profitable lately, but if that is something that you're shooting for, you can time your shearing so that it's going to line up with that about 1-inch fiber length at the time that they go for processing.
Right. About 60 to 90 days growth will get you that 1-inch length.
Now, Gregg, what happens to the wool after it's sheared?
We would process the wool, and we would sometimes depending upon the quality of the wool, we separate the bellies off. We do have some South African meat merinos, which would give us a little higher quality clip, but we would separate that off, we bag it, and then we haul it to Mid-States wool growers, and they buy it in the raw form, just in a plastic bag.
In general, we typically like to separate colored fleeces from the white. A lot of spinners are interested in natural fibers and like that natural color, but if you're selling wholesale, that's a lot more work to sort through and is going to cause you some discounts. So if you know you've got a mixed flock with some darker fleeces in there, it is important to try to keep those separate. But if you are selling directly to spinners, they may not be concerned with that. So just know, based on how you're going to market your wool, how you need to sort it on the day that you're shearing.
Ideally, if you separate all the blacks, separate the bellies, that would be your best option.
Good. Now, Greg, at the research station, do you guys do your own shearing, or do you have somebody hired to come and help?
We sometimes do our own shearing if they're smaller groups, but we do hire someone that will come in and do the bulk of the shearing when we have big groups done.
Can you tell me some about how you prepare your shearing area, whether it's you shearing at home or on a different project or at the station? What are the consistent things that your area needs to be set up for?
Right. We always have the sheep inside, keep them dry the night before shearing. We try to do 12 hours off feed. We do leave water in front of them. If they're ewes that are pregnant and due to lamb within 30 days, you may even want to go 12 to 24 hours without feed. No grass, no hay, no grains. Bedding is fine. Don't put a bunch of fresh bedding in because it will contaminate some of the fleeces. But we do keep them inside, keep them dry, and that's the best way to get it done. So, as far as an area, we try to have one standard area set up where we bring the sheep to the shear. We do not make a shear move from one barn to another. We would either haul them, drive them, whatever it takes. We try to space it out that if we have 200 head and he wants to do them in 2 days, we'll have 100 ready the day before he gets there. Then we'll move those out of the way, bring the others in, and have 100 ready for the next day. So we have a certain area where we keep it clean. Plywood floor is fine, concrete floor is fine, but anywhere that's dry, not slippery, and it's a clean area to process the wool.
A side question I have for you, knowing that one of our other research stations that has sheep, they have hair sheep, with primarily a Katahdin base in that flock. And we have heard a lot, and some of our visitors or viewers may be wondering themselves, have you ever considered going the hair sheep route? Avoid shearing.
No, I'm a sheep shearer. The hair sheep are good. They have a novelty market for them. And they sell good. They do good. They're easier as far as the shearing part. But still, we sell sheep by the pound. And, I think you take a little bit of loss because you don't have as heavy muscled lambs, as heavy carcass lambs. Now, if you get into some of the Dorper crosses, but you're still going to be penalized a little bit if you want to sell bigger framed, commercial type finished lambs.
Yeah, so with everything, there's always benefits, disadvantages, whatever decision you choose to go with. But if you do find yourself in a situation where you want to have sheep or goats and you just don't have the ability to shear them, it may be worth considering the route of going with a naturally shedding animal, but know those considerations of what the market is demanding and what you may potentially sacrifice with that decision. But there's no specific right or wrong way when you look at how to select the breeds you want in your system. Just being cognizant of what your buyer wants and how you're going to manage to meet their needs. Right. And to keep you in business for the long term. Now, Greg, you shear both for work and on your own time sometimes.
Yep.
What type of advice do you have for folks who may be considering becoming shearers themselves?
It's hard work, but it's a rewarding job. I like it. I like a job where it's similar to cutting and splitting firewood. Like, you can see progress. You see clean sheep, after they're sheared. They look good. I've met a lot of nice people. A lot of the people that raise sheep I consider them good friends, and we've got to know a lot of people that way, and it's a good, honest profession. So, and it's a really good side job.
Yeah, for all ages, really, too. Right. If you're able to drive a vehicle and get somewhere on time and take your equipment with you, you can rack up a nice little savings account for whatever big dreams you have. And if that's to buy a shearing trailer or do something else with your life as well. Shearers are in demand, and you can set the pricing that you intend to charge based on quite a few factors, whatever works for you. And if you're interested in getting some instruction, you can come out and check out the classes that we offer here in Ohio. We offer, as I said previously, twice a year, in most cases a spring and a fall shearing school, that you can come out and chat one-on-one with people who do shear professionally and also those who are getting started in the business to find out the ins and outs of how to get started and then also maintain and grow your business. So sheep aren't the only animals that need shearing. We have people come to class that have experience shearing llamas and alpacas as well. And as we mentioned before, there's some goat breeds that need shearing as well. Greg, do you have any experience shearing goats?
Yeah, goats, Angoras, a few, not very many, but they are a challenge. I would recommend shearing those twice a year. Just don't call me, please. Llamas and alpacas, they can be challenging as well, but it is important that you get the fiber off of them, and it does keep them a lot more comfortable, and it does need to happen. So Angora goats, you don't see a lot of them, but there are some, and they definitely need sheared because they get matted and get pretty hard to handle.
Definitely. As we're thinking about folks who may be coming out for a shearing school or getting invested in their own business, your equipment does play a big role in how successful you're going to be and how fatigued you'll be at the end of the day. When it comes to selecting your handpiece, combs and cutters, things like that, do you have advice for folks on how to tell, quality from, I guess, the scale of quality,
right,
from good to bad?
Right. If you deal with companies, Mid-States Wool Growers is one that's here in Ohio, and you can find a lot of stuff online, but don't go cheap. Buy good quality steel, good quality combs and cutters, use good oil, get the appropriate clothing, but all of that will help you make your job better. So, and if you deal with a reputable vendor or dealer, they'll guide you in the right way, or talk to somebody else that shears and they'll get you pointed in the right direction also.
Greg, in the general public, there are some misconceptions about shearing animals and whether that is a concerning practice or a beneficial practice for animal welfare. You and I know that it is important to shear on a regular basis. Can you tell me some about why shearing is beneficial for the animal in the long run, for its health and wellness goes?
Sheep should always be sheared, as well as llamas, alpacas, Angora goats, at least once a year, if not twice. It is important in the spring. We can get fly strike if they get a lot of fecal material around the back end of the sheep. Also pre-lambing, it's important. It keeps our barn warmer. It can keep the barn drier. We can get less, use less straw and bedding if we have to. But it is important and healthy for the sheep that they get sheared at least once, if not twice a year.
Definitely. So if you have any questions about the methods used for shearing and how important it is to make sure you have a management plan in place for how to get those fleeces off your animals, we would be happy to talk with you some more. We'd be also encouraged to have you attend an event where we can show you some of our Ohio State facilities. We often do tours of other farms in the area as well. And so if you're curious to learn more, we invite you to get in contact with us and of course follow us for more updates from the OSU Sheep Team webpage, which is sheep.osu.edu. And will soon be changed to the Small Ruminant Team, so we'll be even more inclusive for all of our ruminant friends when those resources are released. Greg, thank you for your time today. We're going to do some more footage here as people continue to practice shearing, and it's been really enjoyable so far. I'm looking forward to day 2.
See, this is something that he does. A lot of people don't, on the bottom of the leg there. So you open up one side, and then you just keep going from where there's no wool to wool.
I think that's one thing we got caught up with earlier today. People want to start in the middle of the fleece. Always go to where it's clear, right, Justin?
Go from where you don't have wool to wool.
And you notice Greg isn't going straight down. He's still using what I call that 45-degree angle.
Constantly using that other hand to pull the skin tight and to manipulate the wrinkles and everything so that you don't nick as much.
So as soon as he gets that first blow, he'll put that fist right into that leg and pop it out. And again, we're going to dish along that bottom there so we don't catch that tendon. If you noticed it, he went really fast by it, but he ran that comb and cutter sideways rather than straight on to avoid that.
Just past the back, just 2 or a little bit past the backbone, and at least 3/4 to all of the dock. Because if you don't get that at least 3/4, you're going to play heck trying to get it on the back side. So that's a long stretch over, especially if you have a real long animal.
See how Gregg keeps using those knees? He's popping that animal out so it makes a tight ball for him to feel around.
He stretches. He's using all of his arms, his elbows, whatever he can to keep that head up tight. He's using, pretty much you're using your body as extra hands.
He's always dancing that sheep around to where that spine's right there with that machine. Again, if you want to learn footwork and understand where that sheep needs to be, you need to be shearing on one of these stationary machines. By no means do you need to pull on it, but it's really nice to use that ear as a handle.
And when you're doing anything with the legs, it does not take much pressure to move that leg. The harder you hold that leg, the more they're going to fight you. So the least amount of you touching that leg, the best. So you don't have to touch much, just a little pressure here and there, and they'll just do what you, most of the time, they will do what you want. Let's go. Thank you. There's sheep.